So I'd love to start. Typically, the way I start these podcasts is I have a question and then we lead into a conversation. But I felt for this one, it'd be interesting to go through your story
Mm,
around bullying and around just the journey to where you are with Arm for Life. And we can
yep,
start from there and then build from there.
sure, yeah. So, I mean, my whole why is kind of grounded in my experience of school, in terms of why I do what I do with Arm for Life and how I got into it. Um, Everyone has a different experience of school. I always ask the question when I'm first speaking to a group, even with adults. What did you experience of school? I find it interesting that most of primary school students put their hands up for, because there's three categories of you love it and best time of your life. School's a bit meh. I hate it. I can't wait to get out. Primary school students tend to love it, or some fall in the meh category. There's a few that don't like it. Adults tend to be like, yeah, I loved it, or it was meh. There's very few adults that hated school, which I find really interesting. But I get to high school and 90% of hands go up in I hate it and I can't wait to get out. And they're the most passionate hands as well. And that was kind of my experience. Primary school was good. I was champion boy, year 1 to 4. I was the fastest kid. Everyone likes a fast kid in primary school, so you're naturally popular. Everyone wants to be your friend. Everyone wants to talk to you, and that was really good for me because home wasn't good. There were some real difficulties at home, and I was really struggling with my self-esteem and lots of fighting and and a lot of it was kind of directed towards me, and I was really struggling with my identity. And I get to school and I'm the fastest kid. Not that I didn't just find my identity, I found my value. Then I lost it in year 4. I ended up with eczema so bad that both of my feet were covered with these little bubbles. I was given a drug called cortisone. Being on the roids in year 4 doesn't end well for anybody. So I doubled in size, lost my speed, my where I was getting my value, my identity. The bullying started, but it wasn't severe. Switched my focus in year 5 and 6. I was offered a place in the PAC program, in Perth. That's, or WA, that's the advanced classes. You get to leave school, go to another school, choose a subject you want to focus on. So I kind of found my identity in that. But then year 7, I chose the wrong friends. And so a game of basketball turned to a game of keep you off. The guy who had the ball didn't like the fact that I caught up to him and he started wildly throwing punches, and all my friends jumped in. And then they bullied me for the next 2 months until the end of year 7. So back in the day, high school started in year 8. I went in and I didn't trust anyone. I didn't find friends in the middle of year 9. And because of, all of the background and struggling, not finding any identity, I basically, day 1 of high school, the bullying started and it never stopped. And then my parents went through a divorce in the middle of year 8 as well. Everything fell apart around about the same time. And the bullying I'm talking was severe. So the time that I'm pretty old, I graduated in 97. My school, literally, our year group was known as the worst year group that had ever been through the school at that time. So we didn't get any of the camps and the dinner dances and whatever. We got none of that. It got cancelled every single year. By the end of year 12, and I know this because I've stood at my graduating photo. I've spoken at my old school. Um, I don't have any photos because it was such a traumatic experience. But standing at the photo and counting, out of the 180 students, 90 to 100 guys, there were 58 guys that were bullying me every single day. So it never stopped. Every class, every break. Not finding friends in the middle of year 9 meant that I didn't have my crew, my people. And then once I found them, they weren't great. We never hung out outside of school. There was no support. Someone else got bullied in the group, and everyone just kind of stood back in the shadows, hoping that that the attention did get turned on them. And I then went home, and because mum had left and dad disappeared even further into work, and my brother graduated once I finished year 8 because he was at the end of year 12. I basically grew up alone. It was because of my grandma is the sole reason why I survived, because by the anxiety and depression was so severe. I woke up feeling sick, afraid to go to school every single day because I knew I was going to get bullied, but I didn't know when or by who. And by the middle of year 10, I had a plan in place to take my own life. I couldn't function, I couldn't cope, and there was no help. And the things that I used as coping mechanisms turned into addictions, which there was a ripple effect for 15, 20 years. But that's another conversation. But yeah, I was an absolute mess. And so I got out of school, joined a team going into schools, because even though I was in the advanced classes in primary school, I passed year 12 by 2%. So my brother was like second to ducks. He was very smart. I completely shut down and couldn't do any work. And so I got out of school and joined a team going into schools, and partway through that first year had a turning point, realized I was desperately in need of help and no one was there to give it. And that's where the seed was planted. You need to be that guy. You need to create something that actually practically makes a difference. I had no idea what that meant or where that would go. I volunteered for 2 years and left to get a real job, according to my dad, because he's from, hardcore, old
Blue
school,
collar.
business based. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and, brother went and did a couple of university degrees and is, almost head of a psych department at university here in WA. He's that kind of high level academic. That was never going to be me. And so I left and literally after 6 months got offered 3 jobs on the same day. And one of them was to go back as the coordinator and start speaking for that team. So I did that. That was 25 years ago. So I've been speaking for 25 years overall. I did that for about 6 years, pulled away to get my teaching degree, became a chaplain in a school. So I was on the ground working with young people one-on-one, but also speaking to year groups. So the speaking never stopped. And right towards the end of my degree, I saw a student that walked past me that reminded me of me, same body language, looking down the ground, biting their nails. And it took me back to that seed that was planted. And so I decided I wasn't going to teach. I have incredible respect for teachers that have a very hard job. I just wanted to reach to go further. So, we're now 12 years in, similar mission, driving everything. We have over 50 team members. We've got 25 presentations, 9 programs, 3 camps. We're in anywhere between 4 to 10 schools a week. It's not only spilling outside of the state, but it's spilling outside of schools. So we did a 6-month program for a company called Western Power in WA, which is one of the major power companies. Which they absolutely loved. I'm going over to New South Wales every term now because, as an RUOK ambassador, which happened about 4 years ago, one of the ambassadors asked me to go over and speak in the town they grew up in, and the wellbeing nurse overseeing that town has told all the other wellbeing nurses, and it's starting to spread, and they want us to cover the whole of rural New South Wales. So, in
Wow.
talks with Adelaide and Melbourne. 2020, I went to South Africa and spoke in Cape Town for 2 weeks. And I was meant to go back this year on a tour sponsored by Crocs, of all things. It's one of those shoes I swore I would never
How cool
wear,
is that?
and now I'm going to have to wear them, unfortunately. Even though I think that they are they're pretty gross. But yeah, so there's a lot. It's kind of exploded, and this is brand new, interesting timing. Literally last week, Tuesday. No, what day are we today? It's Wednesday.
We're on Tuesday.
Um,
Oh, Wednesday. Sorry, Wednesday.
It's Wednesday. Last week on Wednesday, I got the message from one of my team that we just got our charity status. So for 12 years, we've operated as a
Wow.
business. It hurt my brain.
Congratulations.
I wanted to be a charity. I'm like, I have no idea what to do. And in fact, kind of gave it to the wrong team member. Wrong team members in like someone who probably knew about as much as I did, and so it's extended out to almost 2 years, and they did the best that they could, but obviously was kind of fumbling with some things and gave it to the right team member, and within a week it got across the line. And yeah, so the moving forwards, it's really exciting because we have, like, literally it's the first year after 12 years we have the right team involved in every role. We're not kind of cramming people into the wrong holes to fill jobs. Everyone has the right place and the right role, and that itself is really exciting because I've been working till about 12 or 1 o'clock every night for the last probably 3 years. I don't really want to do that anymore, because I love it and I'm passionate, and the kind of responses that I get, like, 4 to 10 schools a week. Half of that time, I've got students standing around me afterwards telling me their stories, sharing, because everything is vulnerable. That story that I share, I do with every presentation, or at least every first group that I speak to. And that level of authenticity and vulnerability is the most powerful tool that I have. And we have as a team, and the engagement's been incredibly powerful because of that. There isn't really a group that I speak to that I can't engage with anymore. You would think I'd figured it out after 25 years. Yeah, that's kind of the why, and my
Wow.
story essentially. And I'm so passionate about it. Every 2 or 3 weeks, there's disclosures after presentations of kids, wanting to take their own life or have attempted, or and I can direct down the right avenue because I've engaged with them, right, and they've connected, and and so there's so many topics that we speak on now, and I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't have it any other way. Bullying, resilience, self-esteem, mental health, managing emotions, down to the practical stuff around vaping and sexual harassment and sexual consent, and talking about respect and self-respect, and just wanting to help with whatever we can help with, basically.
Well, it's wild as well because, at school for me, and I'll share some of my story as well.
Mm.
At school for me, when I came into end of year six, I was getting quite chubby.
Yep.
And I just remember, things stick with you, right? And you don't realize until you're looking backwards how much small comments affected you. Like,
Yeah.
this one person was bullying the way that I used to run, and for the rest of from year six, I think it was year five or six, all the way through till, I mean, gosh, even sometimes now, just thinking about it,
Yeah.
just being anxious about how I'm running, because she was like, "Oh, you run funny," and like
Absolutely.
started laughing at me. Remember in year six when I had I was heavy into the church, into
Yep.
Pentecostal
Yep.
Christianity, and I was just a huge, and my personality type is I'll just fall into things and I'll just get really obsessed with them, go all in. I was doing the
Okay.
leadership training when I was 12 years old for the
Oh,
church,
wow.
wanting to be a youth leader, and so I
Yeah.
was at
Yeah.
school, right, and I was in year six, and I used to go up to the kids in the yard, so to speak, or in the playground as we call it in Australia,
Mm.
and I would go up to him and saying, "Hey, like I'd love you to come to youth group," just a kid, like just passionate about
Sure.
whatever.
Yeah.
And everyone started to find out, like I was just saying, "Oh, come, let's do this, do that." And I had a little brother at the time, who's 18 now. I think he is 18 this year,
Yep.
18 next year. Sorry, I think it is, or maybe 18 this year, one of the two. And so I couldn't have any friends over, so I'd be like, "Oh, come over, and we'll hang out, and then we will go to youth group on Friday." Like it's just this whole thing for me, and everyone found out. So I remember at the back of the school, and as a kid, right, things are much bigger than what they are when
Yeah.
you're adult. Like you think about
Yeah.
things differently. To me at the time, I think it might have been five or six different boys from the class. They got in a circle and they started to like just pick on me, like just start saying stuff to me and like pushing me
Wow.
around, these kind of things. And like even now, like that, there's I'm holding back the emotion, but that for me was a very traumatic experience. And
Absolutely.
that was my year six experience. And then so I was still quite innocent. Year seven came along, and I guess the years before that, there was little things here and there. But year seven came along, and same thing as you. Like I just started hanging around the wrong people.
Yep.
It was I was in a This was during the Cronulla riots. So 2006 was when the Cronulla riots
Okay.
happened, and it was between the Aussies and between Lebanese and Middle Eastern
Right.
individuals, and that the tensions were very very high. Like all the individuals from the West came to Cronulla, and I remember driving through there, and there was people
Mm.
fighting, rioting. So there's a lot of tension between the minorities in Australia from the Middle East and Australians. And so that the school I went to, there was it was a lot of Greeks, a lot of Lebanese people, and I was, for me, a Christian kid, like at a school that was with individuals that were heavily Muslim. I was
Yep.
super scared. Like I was
Yeah.
in primary school, I had that bad experience and being bullied
Yep.
about, sharing my faith at the time.
Mm.
I go to school, I'm like, "Oh, I can't let anyone know about this because if there is, it's going to be the same thing as Crown
Sure.
Riot." So all these little things in my mind as a
Yep.
kid, you're a kid,
Yeah.
you hyper, you exaggerate things a lot in your mind. But even now, looking back, it makes sense. But I was at school, and then there was this kid called Yusuf, and he, at the time, was the troublemaker. And I started
Mm.
becoming friends with him and all the troublemakers, and so I
Ah.
started to do things that they did. But when I first came to the year, the groups that were into computers, I was friends with them. The groups that were the cool kids, I was hanging with everyone. Like I felt pretty safe. And then I started hanging around this wrong crowd, so I started to bully these different kids, and they started to bully me. So I they bullied me, I bullied them, and thus the cycle continues. And I remember
Yeah.
a few experiences, like I became like the class clown, and not in a good way,
Mhm.
not in like a fun, playful, innocent way, but in like a causing trouble,
Yep.
like throwing stuff at the teacher, throwing like bits of chicken wing and just most ridiculous things. I just Yeah, just really really bad.
Who
And
has chicken wings in class?
before you go to the canteen, and then I bring them to the class and throw,
Okay.
throw them
With
up.
the sole purpose of
Um,
throwing them. Okay. Wow.
yeah, pretty much. I was just troubled, like, and it just
Yeah.
kept growing from there. And then year nine, I started to smoke weed and
Yep.
do various things like that, and had severe social anxiety to the point of speaking to someone, I'd blush and just feel super uncomfortable,
Yeah. Wow.
sweating. My face was just bright red.
Yep.
And so I used alcohol as a way to, because I felt trapped as a kid. I felt like I had I was in between two places. Like I had all this expression inside me, all these things I wanted to share with the world, and
Yeah.
then this kind of like I felt like had a gag in my mouth. I couldn't speak. It was just
Yeah.
tightness in my
Wow.
throat, and I just felt so alone. And I didn't have this, anyone that would accept me. I just go with them kind of thing. And that was
Yeah.
usually the naughty kids. Then I started to go down that road, and the drinking didn't stop. And like you said, things that go throughout your life, right? You don't notice until it's over. I've
Mm.
been 6 years now, I think almost 7 years, 7 years next month, not drinking. I had a few
Yep.
different taste of alcohol, but nothing other than a sip or two just to try to taste something. But I haven't
Yeah.
been intoxicated. I haven't drank for almost seven years now, and
Wow.
but that was my whole teenage years.
Yep.
All the mistakes, like I've cut open my hand, like I got a massive, can't really see on the screen here, but I got a massive cut here. Almost lost
Yep.
my hand because I was drinking alcohol. Got into fights, done things that I wouldn't even care to mention on camera,
Yep.
and that was
Yep.
all from social anxiety and from things as a kid. So
Yeah.
that's a bit about my story, and there's some, I guess, just to lead into next point, and feel free to share any comments on that. But
Yeah.
there's this talk online at the moment around. I mean, I don't want to single them out as any individual, but I've seen lots of
Hmm.
talks in the manosphere and the red pill community around bullying is a positive thing, and bullying
Mm.
builds resilience. So I guess using my story as an example, anyone you could think of, is that true? And where does
Yep.
the line stop when that comes to bullying?
Yeah, sure. I think there's a lot of really good, interesting points, and there's even similarities between our stories, to be honest. Because anytime, and we talk about this with self-esteem, like when you're struggling with your self-esteem, you don't feel good about yourself. Your brain subconsciously or unconsciously looks for coping mechanisms to feel better. And so, whatever you latch onto, and we went down different paths. I didn't have access to those cool guys because I isolated myself, and so mine were movies, gaming, and porn. Whereas yours, end up down,
That was
weed
me
and
too.
alcohol. Yeah, yeah, okay. And but that's your brain is looking for that because it needs to feel better, etc. But it eventually just makes everything worse. And that's what I'm talking to young people a lot all the time. And interestingly enough, 2 weeks after mum left, the extension of my story is that I walked into a new video store back in the day when there's things called video stores, which I have to explain to young people now, which is ridiculous because
Remember that?
they were the best thing ever, way better than
They were.
streaming. Um, and a very attractive woman behind the counter asked if I could help out, started helping out on Friday nights. And within a couple of months, I did it for like a year or two. Within a couple of months, she was like, "Oh, what do you do Saturday nights?" And she picked me up, took me to a youth group. And I, in and out, kind of went to a youth group over my teenage years. And my turning point when I was 18 was becoming a Christian. And that was I guess, the understanding of the fact that I had value and I didn't deserve to be treated the way I was. And so, that was the beginning point where things shifted and changed. I didn't see a counselor until I was 24. Back to your question. Um, I, interestingly enough, I went to, so going into rural New South Wales every term at the moment, going back in December. And 4 weeks ago, I went with basketballer. Naaman Hightower, his name is. He's 6'7". He looks the part. He's a
That's
baller.
huge.
He's from Oakland, California. It's not that big, bro. We've got a guy in Perth who I'm taking to schools at the moment who's 7'2". He's the largest man that I have ever met. And he's a Greek guy named Giannis. He's taller than the Giannis in the NBA. He's ridiculous. I have photos. It
Even the word
literally
Giannis
looks.
sounds like a tall person.
I know, I know. It looks like I'm sitting next to my dad as a child. It's crazy. Naaman at least is close-ish to my height. I'm 6'1". So Naaman was shot at 17, like crazy story. And like he grew up in the same area as Steph Curry. He's trained with the Phoenix Suns. He's a baller. He's playing in Finland right now. So he literally finished playing
Wow.
in Sydney. He's playing in Melbourne next when he comes back. Melbourne's kind of his home now. And so when he came over to Perth, we connected, and I took him into schools into this area in New South Wales. And while we're there, because we spent 4 or 5 days together, so heaps of talking, heaps of discussing, and he's a deep guy, so we had lots of chats. And I remember about halfway through, I did a bullying. That one of the days was bullying presentation, and he was like watching a video of some of these guys talking about how, nah, man, you need to be bullying, and there's like soft guys, and I'm like, what we don't
Mm.
understand in that conversation is where someone's at, like internally, when you have a low self-esteem and you're already struggling about how you feel about yourself. Like my response to that is, well, what about that kid who you don't really know where they're at and they are literally falling apart on the inside, and you get bullied? It doesn't actually create more resilience. It destroys you. It literally tears you apart on the inside. Like literally in 2013, across our country in Australia, when Julia Gillard was the boss of the country, the stat was around, excuse me, I'm RUOK ambassador, so I'm across all this, and just did a gatekeeper course on the weekend, which is like over here in WA, it's like the suicide prevention course run by the Mental Health Commission. Literally the suicide rate, it's around early 3000s every year. And in 2013, it was around 3,200, 3,300 people who took their own lives across the country. And the stats at that point were 80% were bullying related. Bullying, and I know so many stories of people that have taken their own lives because they've been bullied. It doesn't build resilience. When you unpack what resilience actually means, and look, where Naaman and I land is the fact that maybe it's a cultural difference. Maybe, in America, it's seen a little bit different. Yes, to a point, but it still destroys people. And when you understand what resilience is, what we talk about with resilience, and that's what my book is about, is the reacting to responding, reacting or responding to our problems. And we have to build the ability to respond to our problems, not react. When you get bullied, it doesn't mean that you get better at responding to your problems. Not at all. How does that? It might develop a toughness or a grit for some people, but for others it won't. And so, how do you know the type of kid that's going to develop the grit and the type of kid that's going to fall apart? It's about their background. It's about how they've been nurtured. It's about all the other components that have developed who they are as a person. Bullying doesn't help people, and it just always makes things worse. And in fact, I don't know about you, but I've never met a happy bully. I've never have, but they're not
Never.
okay. They get good at wearing a mask. Well, I got this and I got that, and I'm cool and I'm tough and I'm like, and the bravado and all the crap that's not real. When you actually get down to it, they're not okay. They're not actually comfortable in themselves. They're not okay in themselves. Bullying itself is a coping mechanism that turns into an addiction. It's why adults bully other adults, because they don't realize not only are they destroying someone else's life, they're not okay, and that behavior perpetuates and they keep on doing it. Our government spends millions or billions of dollars on workplace bullying across our entire country because there are adults that bully other adults in the workplace. It doesn't work. It's not healthy. That's what I say.
Yeah, and also I think I mean, maybe it is a language thing in America, but I feel
Mm,
that in Australia there's a difference between, banter and then bullying, right?
very much
And
so.
and and then so coming back to self-esteem, and again, this all from as far as I can see, and you can speak to this as well, like this isn't just about, in schools or youth or kids or just about bullying in high school. It's like this trickles on and throughout someone's whole entire
Yeah,
life. There's so many
absolutely.
things. If someone doesn't have, the and this is something that I learned that actually probably saved my life, to be honest with you. When I was
Mm,
14, 15, there's a book that I read, and it was Money in You by a guy called John Kehoe. And then I eventually led into the Tony Robbins kind of esque world around
sure.
personal development. And the one thing I got from that that's relevant to this conversation is it's that someone can change how they feel and how they can change their reality. But not
Mm,
everyone has the luck that I had, which is my mum happened to be into those books, and I happened to have the bookcase, sitting there, and it happened to be a Friday night, and I was, super lonely, and I didn't have, Instagram and Facebook and those things back then.
yep. Yep.
At least I didn't have it
That
as it
that
is
doesn't
now,
help
which
with
is
loneliness either, by the way.
yeah, we can speak about that as well. I have something interesting I want
Yeah.
to share on that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then Mum's like, Mum, I'm bored. Read a book. The one time she ever said that to me, I did actually read the book, right? Picked up a
Okay.
book and I read it, and it gave me this belief in my mind that I can change my reality.
Mm,
But a lot of
mm,
people don't have that, right? So if someone, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't teach people that, because I think it's important, we should, but a lot of kids don't have that feeling. It's like, people believe that they can't change their life. So this is just this way I am, or it's their fault. It's this kind of victim mentality, or rather,
yeah.
what's it called? Internal locus control, external locus control, rather than
Yeah.
internal.
Yeah.
And I think when these individuals, and for myself, before I read this book and before I realized that, it's like everyone is against me. Like I used to play Eminem in my room
Yeah.
and listen and sing the lyrics when there were CDs. It's
Yeah.
the lyrics were like about hating my mom and all these kind of things,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because I thought everyone else was against me.
Yep.
So to bring the point home, when it comes to bullying, and when it comes to the different elements of it, I feel that it's hard to see the world in an objective way when your brain's not fully developed.
Mm.
And then once that happens, it goes through the rest of your life. So there's so much to it.
You, um, we all see everything through a lens, right? So when you have a low self-esteem, that's the lens you see. I would do the analogy. What people don't know out there in the podcasting world is that I'm using my glasses case to prop up my camera, so I can't access my glasses. Otherwise, I'd put my new glasses on and show you. I had laser eye surgery like 13 years ago, so I've got 20/20 vision. I've got astigmatism in this eye, and I've had. There's a long story here. Talk about health stuff. I've got chronic sinusitis. Got it from mold in our house. Ended up,
Oh, mold's bad.
oh, bro. So I've never had sinus issues in my life. End up, every 3 or 4 days with an ice pack on my face. The pain and pressure in my face is second to none. I had surgery a year and a half ago. Helped a little bit, not really. Found out 2 weeks ago that I have a staph infection in my nose, and it's probably been there for 4 years. So now I went to someone said to me, go to a optometrist, see if it's your eyes. Found astigmatism. They gave me glasses, most expensive pair I've ever bought, but they have pink lenses to try and help with what's happening with my face and my eyes working harder because of the astigmatism. I put those on. Everything looks pink. Other than the fact that I look like a tech genius, apparently I look like Tony Stark. Everything, my vision changes. Everything I see looks pink, right? I wear them for long enough, I take them off, everything's now blue. We see things through a lens. And if we have a low self-esteem, right, if you've been bullied, you see everything through that lens. And so you can't change it. You can work through that over time so it doesn't dictate your behavior. But it's the lens that we see everything through it, especially with a low self-esteem. So when you have a low self-esteem, someone corrects you, you see it as criticism. It changes the way we see things, the way we internalize things, which is really important to understand because it can have an impact on relationships, an impact on friendships, and like you were saying before, banter. Banter is absolutely fine. But, as a perfect example, friendship group I had about 10 years ago, we're hanging out fairly regularly. And there's a guy named Steve, he's one of my closest mates, married a Canadian, moved to Canada and betrayed me. But so I don't see him anymore. But he was kind of like, oh, Steve, like it's always Steve's fault. It was just, he would roll with it. He would always find it funny and we'd joke and laugh. And I remember one particular, it's like, oh guys, I'm not okay at the moment. Can we stop? And literally the rest of the night became, how do we support him? We didn't kind of push on and go, oh, it's just a joke, just messing around, we're just having a laugh. Like we immediately turned into, how do we help Steve and what's going on and why do you feel the way you feel? That's how it's meant to be. Banter is different. Bullying, it's about the purpose and someone trying to gain power, trying to make themselves feel better, and the fact that the word that I say when I'm talking in schools is that someone who bullies is weak and insecure, and they're trying to gain power. They're trying to make themselves feel better. Someone who's secure doesn't need to do that. They don't need to. When they feel okay in themselves, they don't need to gain that power. So there's a really big difference between that, and I think it's important to understand that. When you understand that, it's helpful to understand the why behind what people do. But yeah, I think the whole lens and how we see things through is I think it's important, both because it's interesting when I go into schools, I do focus on students that bully others because we have to address that. I think that's why resilience and bullying are the two sessions that I've had schools say, I've been here for 25 years, or schools, teachers say, I've been here for 25 years. That's the best thing I've ever seen. When the very first session I did when I went to this town in New South Wales called Coonabarabran, it was a primary school, year threes and fours, bullying, did the two sessions, and then the principal asked me to come back and speak to the exec team at the end of the day. And it was on bullying, and she said that I had two kids that I was going to expel today. At the end of today, they were leaving. They were going to be expelled. They were going to be excluded from the school because of bullying. One of them in year three, in the middle of the presentation, went like this. And she spoke to him afterwards, and he had finally realized what he was doing, and how not only how it was ruining other kids' experience of school and really hurting somebody else or the other kids he was bullying, but that he wasn't okay either. Say year three kid, right? When you explain things in a certain way, you can get through to them and help them to understand that not only are you ruining somebody else's life, it's not good for you. That's really important, because if you just suspension's a holiday. Expelling them and get rid of them means that the behavior continues and they don't understand what they're doing.
And they're isolated.
Yeah. Yeah, the isolation point you mentioned before is so important. Like, we are designed to do life in community. We're designed to connect, and when you isolate, it's destructive. It's not good. So, yeah,
Yeah, and also, there's I think the saying at the core of this is hurt people,
yep,
right? It's like those who are hurt others.
yeah,
And when it comes down to it, at the again, like another layer down, it's like if we don't have the awareness of when someone's doing something wrong to us, we can't even address it, right? If we're
yep,
saying to someone, if we're and this happened to me all the time, even my early 20s, even up to about 2 or 3 years ago, I've had situations in my life where I'm like, why did I put myself in this situation for? I saw all the red flags. I
mhm,
saw all the things that are like, this is not good. I shouldn't be here. This
yep,
person's like not doesn't have the best for me. Is It's a power thing for them. It's a power play. And I see it very, very clearly. And afterwards, by the time I'm like kind of rationalizing to myself, well, this is fine. They're just trying to be playful. They're just doing this or that, the other thing. And it's so crazy how if we don't have the awareness there, which again I think comes from a self-esteem thing, and again, like self-esteem isn't like an on and off thing. It's something that happens up and down around in your whole throughout
yeah,
your whole life, right?
of
Like you
course,
have days where you just feel flat
of course.
and you make
And
bad decisions,
circumstances
and
come that are out of your control that can wreck your self-esteem for a period. Absolutely.
absolutely. And this and for anyone listening, so this is a situation that happened quite recently, and it's like
Mm,
if I had the awareness there, now like going looking back and it's like that shouldn't have been a thing. And it's like
yeah,
letting that person say or do those things and
yep.
rationing to myself how I'm in the wrong position. It's like there's so many you don't know if you don't know. And that's why it comes down to like you said, self-esteem. I think that's a huge
Mm,
element to it.
yep, absolutely. And that's the whole idea of, once I got out of school, had the turning point. I realized I was valuable, and I've had to hang up on people. I've had to walk out of rooms. I've had to, really make a stance, because we have to be able to draw a line in the sand, and like, not I'm saying when I'm talking to young people, like, no, we don't want to be reacting to situations and throwing punches, etc., because that means you're losing control. That's not what we want. To be in control and respond to problems, and so then you are being assertive and standing up for yourself. That requires belief in yourself. You need to know that you're valuable to be able to stand up. I do this. You might have seen this, right? As a the church experience you're talking about. I remember someone doing this 20 years ago. What I self-esteem, right? What I say now, I just happen to have my bag with me. This wasn't pre-planned, pre-prepared. I literally, I used to like pretend I had money, and this is like a plastic cardboard. So one kid, because I give out chocolates for questions at the end, and one kid like
Right.
desperately wanted a Kit Kat, and I was like, I'll trade you this for a Kit Kat. And this has been invaluable, like the best trade that I've done in my entire life. Because I'll be like, yo, who wants $50? Literally every hand goes up. I'm like, what if I go outside and I find some dog poo, and I wrote like, a dog's walked on the ground, they've got some digestive issues, there's some like messed up poo, I rub it in the dog poo, and then I go into the bathroom, and the guys' toilet, because it's always worse than the girls, and I go to the part of the toilet that never gets clean, right under the rim, and I'm like wiping it under the rim, and then I come back, who wants it? And sometimes there's more hands that go up the second time, because I think it's probably more real. And I say that to say that nothing that you do or that's been done to you can change the value that you have. It's the same as a $50 bill. You wash it. I mean, 20 years ago, the analogy wouldn't work because it was paper. But nowadays, because it's plastic, other than burning it or ripping it or destroying it, you don't change the value that it has. And we are exactly the same. And we need to believe that, to enable ourselves to be able to stand up in certain circumstances and situations and say, this is not okay, and know how to do that and what to say and what to do, etc. But placing boundaries, I have similarly found myself in experience recently. I felt like I lost my voice and I lost my value, and I literally had to start seeing a psych again at the start of the year. Best decision I made. Don't know if I'd still be doing what I'm doing if I hadn't have done that. But I knew that. The self-awareness allowed me to realize that. It's such a powerful quality to have self-awareness, to be able to tune into emotions and feel what you're feeling and know, oh, yep, I'm actually.
Oh, are you there? You're right. You're back now. It stopped there for a second, but because the
That's
call
really
came
annoying.
through.
Yes.
That's right. It is what it
Yeah,
is.
the unfortunate
So you
thing
were
of being
saying
on a phone. Which what did I get to?
you're talking about the money and uh, cultivating self-esteem.
Yeah.
That
Okay.
is
Yeah.
the general topic.
Yeah. Just the concept of the fact that, nothing that we do or say or what is done to us changes the value that we have, and you need to know that to be able to stand up for yourself. You need to know that you're valuable. Um, and we can, especially if we've been bullied in the past, or we're a people pleaser, or we have a low self-esteem, it's very easy to forget about placing those boundaries. Um, and like that happened to me fairly recently. Lost my voice. Felt like I wasn't placed. I kind of lost my value as well. So I started seeing a psych at the start of the year. And it's the reason why I'm still here, still doing what I'm doing. Was one of the best decisions I made in the last couple of years, because I kind of lost my value again. If that makes sense.
In speaking about value and how we feel about ourselves, I think a huge component that affects not just youth but also adults as well is
Mm,
social media.
that's huge.
So last night I was scrolling through YouTube, and this video came up, and it was around dumbifying your phone. And what in essence it means is changing and I'll show you in a second, the layout of your phone,
Mm,
and making a few setting adjustments to
yep.
make your phone less appealing. Now, just being completely transparent, for me, like I would go to the bathroom and have YouTube, have a shower, have YouTube going, listen to like podcast, and
Yep. Yep.
in the morning, YouTube, like just constantly have information coming in. And the justification
Mm,
that I always had was, oh, I'm educating myself, I'm learning new things.
sure.
And but the issue with that, right, is that there's no lid on where that goes, right? So what I mean by
Yeah.
that is there's always this hunger inside of me of like, oh, like this, I'm searching for something that I think this will give me, and I'm not getting it. So it's like
Mm,
you're eating. There's this episode on The Simpsons where he's on a conveyor belt eating donuts. It just goes in his mouth over and over again,
yeah.
nonstop. And so he just keeps going, going, and then he's in hell, and he's like, oh, I'm gonna punish him and think that he loves donuts. I'm gonna give him all these donuts, but he just keeps
Yeah.
eating it. And he keeps going. It's almost like that. It's like I'm searching for something that I think I can't find in myself, and I'm looking for it in a source that's actually not going to give it to me, which is my phone.
Sure.
And so I'm sitting there scrolling, and then I'm going to something else, and then I'm like, okay, I'll put my phone away, do some work, which I do. That's the only thing that really stops me. But then it's like, oh, Netflix, and then watch this and watch that, and it
Mm,
just takes away from my life. It's like eating away at all the things that I love and I value. And it's like, well, what am I actually living for? I'm
yep.
living to experience life on one level. I mean, that's one thing, but this constant, incessant need to consume, and not just with the phone, but then it all leaks in other parts of your life. It's like, well, now I've got this, I got Amazon on my phone. It's like, what can I buy for my house? This little thing here, little thing there,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then it's like you have this high tolerance to needing certain things that you kind of lose yourself. So I spent this morning, a part of this morning at least, going through my phone and dumbifying it, right? So if you, I don't know if you
Nice.
can see this, but this is my screen now, right? So it's just
Wow.
it's probably a bit blurry, but you see those
Yeah.
white things there. It's just a list of the applications I have on my phone.
Yep. Yep.
And so literally that's my screen. So I've got phone, browser, music, and I went through all the apps that I don't use, and I just deleted it, and all the
Mm,
notifications that I don't want to see. And I asked myself, what I did is I changed the settings so I can't actually see the name of the app. I can just see the icon, and if I don't know what the icon is, then I don't really use it, right? So I deleted
yep.
that, deleted all the social media apps, and then went on to, and I'll show you just quickly because I think it's really important to share. And I'm
Mm,
happy to share this information if you want to reach out to me, anyone
yeah, it's
listening,
great.
and also if you want to know as well. On my YouTube, my YouTube now is literally just the titles. It's just not the thumbnail, just a title.
Okay.
Um, so all these things here, I'm basically dumbifying it. So I guess
Yep.
long-winded question, but how much do you see in schools, and also I guess by extension, what you've experienced in your life and doing this work that you do,
Yeah.
how much does social media affect the way we see the world, and specifically for young minds?
We know what the stats say, right? We know the year the smartphones came out in 2013, anxiety and depression skyrocketed for the entire population, and for young people more than anyone else. They're the first generation to grow up with screens in their hand, right? So, and this, I try and come across with zero judgment for anything that I present on, anything that I say. The reality is that parents who fall into the trap of giving their really little ones a screen because it's a free babysitter, it's so bad. Like there's a parents do what they do to survive and to get along. but like almost the worst thing that we can do. There's a guy, Dr. Nicholas Kardassis, who's written a book called Glow Kids. He's a professor out in New York who works, he's got his own practice, but works in schools as well. And he says that brains aren't ready for interactive screens until 12. And so he said, TV is not the problem. We've all grown up on TV. It's the interactive screen. So everything you're talking about, your phone and dumbing it down, it's a great idea because so many problems come from social media. We know that. Kids know that, right? So we do 2 camps a year. We go to resilience and mental health camp in July, healthy relationship camp in summer. We've been running them for 10 years now, so about 15 camps in. And it's about probably 5-6 years ago when the social dilemma came out. I watched it and went, oh, why am I not talking about screens and social media on these camps? And so literally I watched it like 4 days before the camp. So I swapped out a presentation, did a screen addiction presentation that we do in schools on the first morning, and then put a bucket out, and because everything we do is through points, right? We do paintballing and archery tag, and the winners get points for their team and etc. And so you get to the end of the camp champs and they get jumpers and hoodies, and so I said, right, you want 500 points for your team, put your phone in the bucket, you get your phone back at the end of the camp. It's 2 days. After the presentation, about 90-95% of kids put their phones in. When I don't do the presentation, about 50% of kids. So that understanding and knowing the details and the information of why it's so bad and how addictive it is, etc., can be helpful. But what's interesting is that the last camp just gone in July, there was a girl on the first night. We hadn't done the presentation yet. She came to me and was like, look, there's something within the little charging port on the phone. There's something stuck in there. Can you get it out? Spent 5 minutes digging in there. I got a little bit out, but not everything. Next, probably 5 minutes, 10 minutes, I get a phone call from mum, and she's like, she's freaking out. She's in hysterics. She wants to come home. And I'm like, look, our point is that, don't send it. Don't come and get it. She's like, I'm not coming to get it. We're like an hour and a half out of Perth, and so there's no way mum was going to come get her. And I'm like, look, leave her here for the next however many days. Like, she'll be okay, and she will figure that out eventually herself. She's like, yep, great, excellent. And then went back, and I ended up spending 10 minutes digging it all out so she could choose to put her phone in the bucket the next day. Not that that choice was taken away from her. Funnily enough, she did choose to put it in the next morning. But after one more conversation with her mum, her mum said, oh, look, clearly you know what you're doing. Great, thank you so much. Just so you know, she said to me that, mum, if in the blink of an eye, all the phones were taken away in the world, I'd be so much happier. But here she is with the concept of facing the next 2 days without her phone in hysterics. I'm talking hysterically crying. That's addiction. And she literally didn't want to be addicted, but she was. And that's where so many young people are at. Like, how many of them are doom scrolling, not even thinking about it. The impact on self-esteem and what we're seeing because we're looking at other people's highlight reels. There's all the factors that we need to address, let alone the fact that just being addicted to being on this thing and on this screen. The average unlocked time for adults is every 12 minutes. Like the issues that we face are crazy. And this idea of, dumbing down your phone and using it far less, it's really important. I think it's a great idea. And as a person who works on their phone a lot, I'm on it way too much, and I'm aware of that, and I don't like that. I try and find little ways of, I'm a big movie guy, right? So if I go to the movies, my phone
Love the
is
movies.
away, it's on silent. It's still, I'm going tonight. It's still one of those things that I love, the smell of popcorn, because I literally grew up as a kid, right? And I would go to with my grandma until it wasn't cool anymore to go with your grandma, and so she then dropped me off. Like a 10-year-old kid, I get dropped off and picked up to the movies every single weekend. It was literally a coping mechanism for me, to the point where back in the day when Wayne's World was at the cinemas, I saw it 3 weeks in a row because there was nothing else out.
Wow.
Like, that's how much of a coping mechanism it was for me. So anyway, yeah. So I think it's, when I go to the movies, I put it aside. I'm not contactable. People in my business, because I've got a bunch of people that are constantly asking me questions, clearly because I'm in charge of an organization. But yeah, so I am uncontactable at times.
Well, also to add to that as well, to bring it full circle with bullying and technology use, or rather social
Hmm.
media use, or all the
Yeah.
above, there's been some studies to show that contemplation is the key to a lot of emotional experiences that we don't get when we have our attention constantly devoted to something. So
Yeah. Yeah.
compassion is a long process. It's not something. Empathy is something you feel straight away. That's where you feel the other person, what they're feeling. Compassion
Mm.
is a long process, right? You don't just all of a sudden like feel bad for someone and then all of a sudden fix it. It's like it takes time. But if we don't have those spaces or gaps to think about the things that we've done, contemplation, those walks, like I remember this is an odd um, uh, concept or idea I'm going to bring up here, but I
Mm.
remember when I was younger, when I was 12, 13, I got my first phone when I was 12, right? And it was a
Yep.
Nokia with a snake on there, like the green kind of screen.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
I hear
remember
you.
a year prior to that, my dad had the huge Motorola phones, the thick ones. But back then it was a snake, playing snake on my phone. But I remember back then, and as early as 10 years ago, I'll have moments where I just stare at the wall and just think about things. Oh yeah, I'm just thinking about this, da, da. And now that people are like, what's wrong with you? You okay? Because you're on your phone doing something. I just stare and just
Yeah.
contemplate, just think about things. And like, I just remember I just would zone out and just go into this weird place, right? And I
Mm.
remember people do it all the time, like sitting in line for the ATM or staying in line for ATM or wherever it might be. We don't do that anymore, right? And I know it
Yeah.
sounds odd, but that those processes, and there's a wonderful book called The Shallows that goes through the internet, right? This book was written in 2004, and he talks about the effects of the internet, and then by
Mm.
extension, media multitasking, which is jumping between different screens. He
Okay.
talks about how and how the lack of contemplation leads to losing the skill of compassion. And to bring that again full circle, it's like how much of our inability to think in long term thinking is
Mm.
affecting bullying and affecting how we see other people. And what's going to happen when we have a generation of, and I think we're already there because I'm a millennial and we're kind of in that position now. What
Yep.
happens when we have everyone who can't think compassionately, who can't
Yeah.
think about, and then when it comes to politics and when it comes to the workforce and big companies,
Yeah.
where they can't think long term about the impacts of their decisions. And that's
Mm.
what bullying really is. I think at its core, it's like, what is the long term impact? Like, how does it impact me, the community, and the individuals around me? And that's, I think, another huge aspect of technology use, that lack of compassion.
Well, you combine that with low self-esteem. So someone who has a low self-esteem is selfish, right? You don't when you have a low self-esteem, all you do is this. You can't see beyond yourself, which means you don't think of impact on other people. You don't think of how it's going to hurt other people. You don't access compassion or because it's all about me. Um, yeah, so I think I think it's hugely powerful, and I think even if you just look at screens and social media in particular, and like um, uh, attention, being able to pay attention, and that attention rate is shrinking all the time, and so we have such crazy rates of ADD, ADHD, etc. But are we looking at other things first before medicating? Like I've got a GP on my basketball team, and he's like, "Yeah, when we taught medicine, you're taught that medication is a last resort." And I was like, "What? Really?" Like you often don't because it's the first option, and whenever there's something wrong, clearly we need medication for things. But something like ADD, ADHD, are we looking at screens? Are we looking at food? Are we looking at sleep? Are we looking at whether they're addicted to something like vaping? Are we looking at the things like that that has a huge part to play in whether people are? And screens are like right at the front. Screens are the most powerful thing, and this generation coming up the first generation grow up with screens in their hand, which means I think it's just a personal opinion. They're kind of more pre-prepared or predisposed to be addicted to things. So something like vaping comes along, sweeps through the entire generation like an epidemic, where high school students are selling it to primary school students. Like there's so many problems related because the brains are already prepared to be addicted to things. Like I have an addictive personality. It's like this, we have an addictive personality based generation coming through. Um, so they're kind of ready to be addicted to something as soon as something comes along and they get a dopamine hit from it. That's all because of
So what
screens and
can
social media.
Yeah, and I guess for those listening and also adults as well, what can
Mm.
people do? I mean, so it sounds like a recurring theme with bullying. I think a lot of things in life it comes down to self-esteem. Let's maybe define for people what that really is at its core, self-esteem, and then maybe some
Yep,
strategies that people can do,
sure.
and also manifestations. I mean, so porn, we can go
Yep.
into a whole range of different things, but so self-esteem, what is it, and then what can people do to improve their self-esteem, so to speak?
And we've covered a lot in one podcast already. And look, they're all a really good friend of mine who passed away last year said to me, like all the 25 topics that we speak on, they're all interconnected. You could draw a mind map
Yeah,
between all of them, right? Resilience and self-esteem sit at the center of all of them. So when you have a low self-esteem, it impacts everything. It changes how you see, it changes the decisions you make, etc. It impacts your ability to be resilient, to be able to deal with the problems in a healthy way and respond. When you have a low self-esteem, you tend to be driven by emotion, so you're reacting, and so you can't be resilient, etc., etc. Basically, what we talk about with self-esteem is how you feel about yourself. It's different to self-image, it's different to self-worth. We define all those things when we speak about it, and we could do a whole nother podcast on that. The things you can do to change your self-esteem and how you feel about yourself, but that is ultimately at the core, and that impacts everything. Because when you have a low self-esteem, you're never more at risk of making a decision you can regret for the rest of your life as when you have a low self-esteem, or I'm desperate to feel better about myself, because that was my entire teenage life. I was constantly trying to desperately do things, people like me, feel better in the moment. And so then right and wrong goes out the window, and conscience goes out the window. And that's, there's a clinical psych named Dr. Tim Jennings who talks about the mind and the brain almost better than anyone I've heard. And he talks about how there's 7 levels of the mind when it comes to decision making. The top 2 levels are our reasoning and our conscience, and we're meant to use, they form our judgment, and we're meant to use that to make decisions. The bottom level is our emotions. So if I have a low self-esteem, I'm making decisions out of emotions, so we're going against our own judgment, making decisions based on how we feel, whether it's anxiety or sadness or anger. And when we run managing emotions presentations, we talk about how every emotion is valid, but we're never meant to make decisions out of them. And so it sets that they're all interconnected, but self-esteem sits at the center, and it's something that we need to address and need to work towards and change, because it's one of those things that doesn't fix itself. It either plateaus or gets worse, and for me, it gets worse. It's kind of centered around our self-talk. We all talk to ourselves. We're not weird. Everyone has that internal dialogue. Most people do anyway. And so when we have a low self-esteem, it's an I guess a picture into someone's mind in terms of their self-talk, and there's usually a negative self-talk going on, and which changes how they feel about themselves and changes the decisions they make. It's incredibly important.
And is there, so just an easy takeaway for people listening, is there one thing that someone can do daily or weekly to really just improve that if they're in a bad place right now?
I'll do the summary version. I'll give you the 6 things we talk about in our presentation. So, and maybe we can do another podcast about it. Number 1 is gratitude. And there's a lot of research around that. We don't have to talk about it. I just get people to write down 3 things they're grateful for every day. Number 2 is self-awareness. It's a powerful, powerful tool. And you have self-awareness. As an example, 14 years of my 45 years on this earth, I've struggled with anxiety. 15 now, I've struggled with anxiety and depression to a severe point. In the last 6 years, as soon as there is anxiety, I feel it. I know it's there, and I know what to do. Previous to that, I didn't. And so that awareness enables you to act upon it, and to be able to do something about it. It actually is empowering, and it feels like you have greater control over your emotions rather than controlling you. Choosing your relationships really carefully. Friendship, sure, but that close dating relationship is incredibly important. In our Australian culture, we find that someone likes us, we ask one question: are they hot? It's ridiculous. Like, yes, you need to be attracted to somebody. You can't base a decision on that. It's obviously clearly what I'm telling young people all the time, because not only do looks fade eventually, but they fade even while you're with the person, while they're still attractive. So you have to look at the other qualities, because you choose poorly. You can have everything else going for you, every other box checked, but you choose the wrong person, it will literally all fall apart and create problems in all the other areas of your life. Talking to someone, so the idea of sharing, like, as I've seen a counselor and 2 psychologists over my lifetime. I think everyone needs to speak to a counselor or psych at some point, because we're all messed up. Everyone struggles. It's not weird. We need to kind of change that perspective on it, that it's normal, a normal part of your life when we are struggling, that we're talking to someone about it. Getting rid of ants. There's a psych in the 60s named Dr. Andrew Beck, I think it was, who coined the term ants, automatic negative thoughts. And we think about them without even realizing. And he's recognized that patients were coming in, we dealt with this negative thought before, and now they're coming in with it again, realize that it was happening automatically without people even realizing. So we have to consciously change. That's what CBT is, constantly changing negative thoughts for positive, cognitive behavioral therapy, which a lot of psychs and counselors use. And the last one, I think, is the most important, because it starts with, it's lifestyle: food, exercise, sleep. You want to change how you feel about yourself, the amount of times I've had conversations with people, and literally I've directed 1 hour. We've talked about food pretty much the whole time. I remember a girl came to me about 10 years ago, 24-year-old model, clinically depressed, blah, blah, blah. We sat down, had 1 hour together, and all I talked about was food. In 4 days, she said, I'm on the way to the gym now. I've got an appointment with my psych this afternoon. Literally changing her food changed how she felt in 4 days. Right? The food can be a form of medicine or the slowest form of poison. Anytime someone says to me, I'm feeling really anxious, I'm like, okay, what have you eaten today? Get into the gym this afternoon. They're the first two things that I say. Because when you are pushing weights in particular, you have the same, literally all of the amino acids in your bloodstream, they all get directed towards muscles. The only one that's left is tryptophan, which is used to make serotonin. So you don't just get a rush of endorphins like you do with any exercise, you get a boost of serotonin, which is your happy, feel good hormone, right? So, and then sleep. Your body uses serotonin to make melatonin. So then you need more of that in your system. It needs to be balanced between cortisol and serotonin. It's like a seesaw. This is all summarized and super, super fast, by the way. So apologies for that. But that's where I tell people to start. If you don't know where to start, what are you eating? Are you exercising every day or every second day? Like getting into the gym, like prioritize self-care. It is not selfish to enact self-care because it's necessary. The current rate of burnout, or was 2 years ago, for adults across the entire country is 73%. There's a reason for that because we're not taking care of ourselves. We think it's selfish, so we sacrifice ourselves, and then we end up falling apart, and then we're not good for anybody. And if we bring it back to talking about mental health, anxiety and depression massively impacts. And if we bring back to bullying, which the whole point of the podcast is that, like, that was, yeah, my parents divorced. Yeah, there was other crap going on. It was the bullying that took me to the point in the middle of year 10 of having a plan in place to take my own life because my mental health was already struggling. Sorry, that was a lot.
No, that's incredible. And if I can just add my own 2 cents to this, so
Yeah,
lately
please.
for me, and so again, like it's really important to know to be aware that emotions don't just come and go. Meaning,
Mm,
as in, you have times where it's 10 out of 10, sometimes it's 1 out of 10, sometimes it's
yep.
zero. There's always you live with and around emotions, right? And for me, having social anxiety for so long as a kid, there's some times where it rears its ugly head, as they
Mm,
say.
yeah.
And it's been a lot like that lately. I've been just working a lot, kind of not isolating myself. I've got my partner here, but I live in another country at the moment where I don't have many friends around. And so
Sure.
for me, it's been a huge thing that's come up for me lately. And
Yep.
what's really helped me when it comes to this podcast is obviously connecting with people and chatting with them, but
Yep.
also just listening to my thoughts and then remembering the parts of my life where, so social anxiety, you feel tightness in the throat, you feel uncomfortable, you feel like you can't express yourself. I had all those emotions come up. So something that's really helped me, and this is for everyone listening, and also I guess for us, if we want to share that as well, it's understanding times in your life where you've been that version of yourself that you want to be, right? So it
Mm,
could be with anything. It could be setting strong boundaries. It could be feeling clarity and confidence in who you are. When I feel that way, I'm like, I feel these ugly thoughts come up again of like, oh, like, you're not good at speaking, you're not good at this, you're not good at that. And just not even saying, oh, no, no, that's not right. Just remind myself, oh, you remember that time I did this? I remember that time when I was like speaking in front of 100 people. I remember that time I did this
mm,
and I was comfortable. Remember this when I did, stand-up comedy, or this, or when I did that or that, whatever. And if you don't have those memories, to imagine them, right? And that could be the big difference for someone. So I wanted to share that as another thing as well, just remembering what you're capable of, and not even trying
yep.
to force your brain to be that version, but just remember this time I did this, this time I did that. It really helps, and that's something I spoke about in my podcast yesterday with a sports psychologist.
Great.
It's a huge shift that people in performance do as well, as they remember that you can't control everything, right? But you can remember
Mm,
when you went into this situation, you performed well, or remember when you felt this way and it was all fine. So I thought that was really, really worth mentioning.
absolutely. Yeah, I would talk about that a lot with anxiety too. Like, just if you're anxious about something, remembering, because 90% of what you're anxious about never happens, and so you almost have to convince your brain, because it's your brain telling you you're going to die. It's not the truth. That's a part of it. It can help some people and not others, but like kind of remembering a time where no, this wasn't the case, and so this might not be the case now. Yeah, that's very applicable.
Well, Adam, thanks for coming on the podcast. I've put all your
My pleasure.
details below, but if you wanted to
Yep.
share where people should go, if they're young and if they're adults, where they can go maybe to find out more about you, that'd be good.
Yeah, sure. Just look up Armed for Life, so AIMEDFORLIFE.com.au. We've got a website. We're on Instagram and Facebook. We are on LinkedIn, but I've got a stronger presence on LinkedIn than the organization. So you can look up Adam Przytula, the Polish surname that no one can pronounce. Prytula. I'm sure you can see it in the writing down below. No, literally no one. Oh, how do I say your surname? Don't bother. Just say Adam from Armed for Life. Yeah, so yeah, happy to chat or connect, or especially now that things are kind of expanding out. If I'm happy to have conversations about if we can help. I don't care where it is or how it is. I'm willing to do so.
And thank you as well for having these conversations and doing the work that you do, right? Because if I had this when I was,
Yeah.
13 years old, and I had someone like you come into the school and just
Yep.
speak, it could have
Yep.
changed my whole life, right? And things happen, and some things that happen, it's just life. But
Yep.
thank you for doing what you do, and thank you for caring and giving a shit, because the world needs it. So honestly, like it warms my heart that you're doing this stuff.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's literally the same for me. That's why I do it. And I find myself saying almost every presentation, don't do what I did, because I kept making these really poor decisions and making mistakes. And if you're a reader, then read The Road to Resilience. I've had adults say, this was really helpful. A friend of mine gave it to his sister-in-law who's studying psychology, and she said it was better than any of the books they were using in their course, which is pretty humbling and beautiful. But it's a helpful tool that I don't have to be there for. So yeah, and again, anywhere I can help. The extension part of the story is that my grandma, the reason why I survived, she was a nurse in Germany during World War II. She would come over in the morning, bring me breakfast and then to get me out of bed. And when I got home in the afternoon, she was there to make me dinner. She was my anchor. She passed away about 4 or 5 years ago, which is pretty hard. But
Sorry to hear that.
that's okay. Thank you. I didn't try and push the emotions aside. I kind of just tried to sit with it and move through it, as you're meant to with emotions. But I remember a teacher saying to me 2 or 3 years ago, now you're an anchor for other people. And I would extend that to say that Armed for Life, I want to be an anchor, like she was for me, to try and provide that same help and support. So you couldn't pay me to do anything else. I love what I do. But I appreciate your kind words. Thank you.
Awesome, mate. And everyone, check out that site, and reach out to Adam if you need anything.
Awesome.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Luke.